As I was saying before, technology so rudely interrupted us. Lovely to see you, see your face. Lovely to talk to you. Can I first ask, is the Roe versus Wade decision amongst the American populace in America as big a deal as it seems to be for the rest of the world?
Well, yes. Probably significantly more, I would think, because obviously it actually affects people here. And clearly, there has been, though having said that, that one minor thing is that there's nothing that came out on Friday that hadn't already come in the leaked document, with the exception of the fact that there were additional judgments or letters attached to the judgment. Let me just get my headphones into a better position.
All right, do that, Tim. Do that.
Sorry about this.
That's all right. You look fantastic now. You haven't got any hair to mess up. Don't worry. Tim,
that's right. Well, I'm in the...
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, Tim, essentially, 50 or more years of law have been rolled back by the Supreme Court. Where does that leave women in the United States who want to have an abortion? How does life change for them?
Well, it leaves them with whatever the law of the state that they live in is concerned. I'm talking about where it leaves the legal situation, obviously, not about, people's feelings about this thing. So the essential character of the judgment was to return the legal regulation of abortion or otherwise to each individual state. And therefore, that is what the situation is. Some of those states have trigger laws which were put in place should Roe versus Wade ever be overturned. Now, I am not sure. There's at least one state where that has gone into effect, though I think in another a judge put it on hold. So that's up in the air right now.
This was, of course...
Because, of course, I think...
No, you go ahead.
No, you carry on.
Well, what I'm saying, this, of course, was the ticking time bomb that the Trump administration left in its appointments to the Supreme Court. Clearly, I would imagine, against the wishes of the Biden administration. But in truth, is there anything that anyone can do to change the mind of the Supreme Court, or is it a law literally unto itself?
Well, if you read the judgment, the Supreme Court would say, or the people who've voted for this decision, that they are correctly applying what the law should have always been, and that the original judgments, Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, were decided on, extra legal grounds. So obviously there's nothing much that can be done about the current court, and that, though I have no doubt that as time moves on, there will be further cases may come about whatever the individual states do. Right now, I suppose the action in theory moves to the states. So, to be honest, to answer that question at all, it seems sort of way too soon to know, because obviously these are things that will happen over the next few weeks. There's also the question of the upcoming congressional and state elections in many states. So about what, whether this will have an effect on how those play out, whether it will change the things that people are running on and the ways that people vote, as a result of that.
Tim, America is a vast and diverse country. Is there any polling that indicates en masse where Americans stand on this issue?
Well, that's an interesting question too, because, either side would have you believe that, on the pro-life side, people would say, well, the Americans have been moving against abortion and they're now, don't support the original Roe versus Wade. The pro-choice people would say that there's almost universal support for abortion. The trick of analysing this comes down to looking at the polls and finding out what people thought should be legal, and that's where it becomes a somewhat different issue, because many people believe that abortion should be relatively unregulated, or at least free to choose in the first few months of pregnancy, but not necessarily right throughout. So I think that the public discussion often revolves around the extreme polarities of those positions, where in fact, individual or collectively different groups of people may have different attitudes to exactly what any potential legislation or regulation should be. And of course, the case that originally started this whole decision was one that put the limit at 15 weeks. And up until 15 weeks, I think the Mississippi law pretty much allowed abortion to take place without any particular constraints. And then afterwards, there were. So that's the law that goes into effect now in the state of Mississippi, I guess, since the effect of the judgment was to uphold, or one of the effects of the judgment was to uphold that law.
Tim, does America care that the rest of the world is losing its stuff over this decision? Do they know that Liberals are beating their breasts and tearing their hair out at Glastonbury, that Lord is saying, F the Supreme Court? So A, do they know that that's happening? And B, if they do they care?
Well, for example, I did see online, as we all do now, one paper, was it the Green Day singer, whose name I don't immediately, Billy Joe.
Someone.
Who in that said he was going to announce his citizenship, and there was something I saw recently of Pink saying that people shouldn't listen to her music if they were pro-choice or something to that effect. So they know that they're talking. Well, the point I'm trying to make here is that those two people are Americans. I did not know about Lord until you told me. No doubt I might have eventually said it. So I think to a certain extent, what anybody else thinks doesn't generally worry most Americans, and it's hard to say. I mean, obviously, people on either side are going to pull up who they
they're examples that support their narrative.
Position.
Yeah. Tim, just to move on to another issue. So you have to have the baby, and you have to send it to school where people are allowed to have guns that they could kill it at school with. Also, some changes sort of completely, in some ways, washed over or subsumed by the Roe versus Wade news. Some changes on gun control in the United States. Are they significant changes that will stop the regular, inevitable and tragic school shootings and mass shootings that go on in that country?
Probably not. I think that the change was about a very specific aspect of permitting concealed carry in the state of New York, and that thing was whether the state required that you show, if you wanted to have a concealed carry of a weapon, that you, for self-defense, that you showed a need for self-defence. The court's decision says that the state can't require you to show that you need it, that you have a need for self-defence, because self-defence is one of the reasons the Constitution allows you to have a gun. So that was a condition. The main question about that, what it didn't alter was the right of the state to permit your concealed carry and to use other grounds, for example, your suitability, your mental health, nor did it say that you could just carry a gun anywhere, that there were places that it was not permitted based on historical examples, and they included schools in the discussion of that. So I don't know what, and there were 43 other states that also have concealed carry permitting laws, which did not require you to prove your need for self-defence, and several writers in the judgment are at pains to point out that those laws that those states aren't affected, nor is the state of New York not. It's still allowed to permit you to have your concealed carry. So the question is, what other grounds they would have in place?
Right. All right. I understand.
Whether it will change the lamentable situation of. So it's not as you will. I've read quite a few people around the world and who want to say that it's a blanket right to let anybody carry a gun in public. Well, there still is a permitting process. Whether, of course, the extension of understanding the law does start to make it hard for anyone to refuse to give a permit to someone would be another question. Though, as I mentioned, these grounds of mental suitability and suitability as a person to carry for concealed carry still were permitted in the permitting process.
Mm. Tim, I
have to say, these are incredibly. I've read much of, not all of the Roe judgment is nearly 200 pages long or something, and the gun one is very long. I've read quite a bit of them both, and these are incredibly complex documents full of historical examples, and I am not an expert in constitutional law. However, we live in a society
that's
where
all right,
the
Tim,
headline is the
Lord
news.
Lord will do that for you at her next concert, because she is, apparently. She knows all there is to know. Tim, in a wider sense, it's lovely catching up with you. The world has changed a lot since you left New Zealand. And it would seem to me that New Zealanders and many others, during the rise of Trump and the Trump years, developed an obsessive interest in American politics and what has been going on in the United States. It's almost as if a kind of proxy ideological war has been fought online over Donald Trump around the world. Have you noticed the same trend, and do you find it curious?
Gosh. Well, yeah, obviously. I mean, I think I do find it, I've always found it, that I myself resist commenting on the politics of other countries, whether it be Brexit, Emmanuel Macron, whatever, even because, the local circumstances and the cultural circumstances aren't so well known. In the case of the US, people show little resistance to comment on what's going on there, and to a certain extent it's understandable because it is or has been one of the most influential and powerful countries in the world. So it does affect what people, how people's trade relationships, to mention a very specific New Zealand concern, take place, and many other things. Nevertheless, it's also true that it's a very difficult country to understand, partly because of what I just alluded to in the gun judgment and the Roe judgment now, because of the states aspect. there are 50 different states which are all have their own health laws, insurance laws, gun rules, everything. So there is no one, and then there are regional variations in cultural attitudes. I live in California, which is a very liberal state in terms of personal freedom. At the moment, a very democratic, extremely democratic voting state in the fact that, the Republican Party has very little say in any aspect of government of the state of California, and it's effectively, under the state constitution, a kind of one-party state of a kind. So, this is not, to talk about it from a Californian perspective, you would hear one thing, but there are 49 other states. So what are you going to, how are you going to describe this enormous continent? I don't know. I think I might have lost myself.
No, you haven't lost yourself.
Right
I think you explained it rather well, and I think we can assume that Americans are not deeply concerned or discussing Lord's views on their Supreme Court at any great length anywhere in the great United States of America.
Well, the first time I ever did corresponding back to New Zealand from the States was, 20 or more years, no, gosh, I'm not going to say how many years ago, with Kim Hill back in the 90s. And, of course, the America's Cup was in San Diego at the time, and we were going mad for winning it. And what was kind of fascinating was that, everybody in New Zealand wanted to know what was going on. And everybody was mad. As you know, New Zealand was completely Red Sox into that, up to the hilt. Every time my mother called me, she would ask about it. Well, a couple of 100 miles up in the road in Los Angeles, nobody knew that was going on, or if they did, they were a small coterie of people.
Yeah.
And the first article I read about it in the LA Times was, the final result. So there's a lot going on here, and people are not, I sometimes think that it's hard. It's how quickly the news cycle moves on here. It won't move on fast on the subjects we've been talking today because they're kind of perennial. And, what starts to happen in the next few weeks or months about how each state responds to this, how people actually respond once they realize the implications for wherever they live, is going to be kind of a fascinating thing for political people to look at. And an important one for every other person because, of course, this is specifically the abortion one that has deeply personal implications and for people's moral and physical lives. So, the story isn't over by any means.
Well, Tim, lovely to talk to you. I am planning that we will do this on a semi-regular basis, if you don't mind.
Well, let's hope we get our microphones sorted out.
I'm sure we will, Tim. Thank you very much indeed, all the way from Pasadena, California. That was Tim O'Brien, who is our man stateside now, and lovely to hear what Tim was saying. And look, if you think you're raving on Twitter amongst your 35 followers about what you think on Roe versus Wade is going to have any impact on Roe versus Wade or abortion law in the United States, you are clearly dead wrong.